Oh, shoot. Hatchet Chat. This is episode, I think we're on 21?
Yes, sir. 21.
I'm here with my man, MC Snax. Hey, Snax.
What up, dude? How's it going, man? Can you believe what episode we are on?
High five. The fifth Joker's card.
That's right.
So you have the Jake. Yeah. What is it called?
Brothers. The amazing Jeckel Brothers, brother. And this is insane that we're actually doing this Joker's card right now.
And so you have the Jake and Jack editions.
Yes. This is the original one I bought when I was probably like 13 or 14 years old. And then I found this one many years later.
Swipe out. Let's see the when you take off this case.
Bam.
Oh, yeah. That's the one I had.
Yeah, you were talking about that photo shoot a little while ago.
Yeah, that's a whole thing, man.
With the claws and stuff.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, Jeckel Brothers, you know, we'll get into it, but this was their in utero. This was their like claim for new metal, multi-diamond platinum. This was going to be their Marshall Mathers LP, and in a way, it succeeds because it wasn't. And it gave them their whole career. And so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the metaphysical and spiritual things that will set up for the Six Jokers card. And we'll talk about the songs. And I'm going to be very candid because I love this record. And the things about it I think I don't like. To me, personally, musically, it's the last really, really good ICP record. And then Dark Lotus is like their last amazing project. That, as Hatchet Chat, you'll be like, well, what are you going to say about the other records? I like the other records, but I love Jeckel Brothers. And it's the last time they nailed it with everything. The Wraith is tight too, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all know, well, I don't know if we all know, but the Wraith Shangri-La is probably my favorite Joker's card. It's probably my favorite album of all time. It is my favorite album of all time. But they were firing off on all levels for sure. And like, I don't, music is so subjective, and like, I don't know if I believe in like objectively good or objectively bad music, but this is an album that I even have a hard time believing that a critic wouldn't like. Do you know what I mean? Because I know like ICP's humor can be crude and stuff, but the production is so amazing. The lyrical delivery like is just amazing. Every song has a cool concept. It's just so good. But we're Juggalos, so of course we're gonna think that. Yeah, the guests.
This amazing guest.
Features.
So let's jump into it, Snax, because we got a lot to talk about.
Yes.
So the Canis leupaster is a subspecies of the African golden wolf native to northern, eastern, and parts of Western Africa. And we talked about on Malenko the art with the pyramids, the Arabic font, like an example of the Muslim caliphate of the 7th and 8th centuries, where the empire just was sprawling, and it was this empire that to people of Western cultures represented the East, represented exoticism. So to have ICP have the pyramids and the pharaoh character, the genie character, this album draws on a lot of those similarities. And we're going to talk about vampires. We're going to talk about Romy cultures is, I think, the correct way to say it, and all sorts of things, German culture, British culture, how this comes together. But the Egyptian jackal, otherwise known as the Canis leupaster, was reimagined as the Egyptian god Anubis. And I realized this is directly where it comes from, because this concept was seen, we've talked about before, in 2400 BC. You have Anubis weighing the heart, and if your heart was heavy, you would be eaten by Ma'at, the crocodile that eats you if you lived a sad life, or you would go to Shangri-La, heaven. And Anubis is the fool that weighs the souls with the scale. So you have the Jeckel Brothers, you have the Egyptian jackal being Anubis, is totally connecting to this ancient historical myth. And I was like, wow, this is so intentional. Of all the Joker's cards, this one is very much jumps off and takes you into this literal thing, kind of like Ringmaster, where do your good deeds send you to heaven, Shangri-La, or do you go to Hell's Pit? And so I was like, wow, the Jeckel Brothers, the Anubis. I mean, had you ever thought about that, Snax?
100%. And I think, you've made parallels to the Egyptian mythology before, and it seems to fit with the Dark Carnival mythology, so perfectly. And with this Joker's card too, one of the things about it is like it similar to Riddlebox, it has such a like specific metaphor in the mechanics of how it works. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like the Great Malenko is a metaphor, for your own like greed and stuff because the Malenko casts illusions. But this is a very clear event that could happen in the afterlife of what determines if you go to heaven or hell. Because of course we know, the more sins you've committed, the Amazing Jeckel Brothers are a juggling act, and the more sins you've committed, the more balls they will have to juggle. And if they fail the act, you're going to hell. And it's just such a concise metaphor for this kind of thing. And like you said, man, lines up perfectly with Anubis.
With the jackals. And it's interesting how Jake juggles your good deeds and Jack juggles your bad deeds, or it's the other way around?
You're right. Yeah, Jake is the good one, and Jack is the bad one. And like Jack is trying to throw like curve balls and everything to Jake to try and mess him up, because if he drops one, that's it. You're going to hell's pit. Jekyll
drop balls, Shangri-La dies, right? That's
exactly.
The line. That's crazy, man. But Malenko is more about, you cast an illusion, meaning you do something evil, you rob a bank, but Malenko's like, oh, well, it's because you deserve this money or something like that. Or a better example,
right.
That might not be a good ICP example. If you're a priest and you do something evil to one of your your people in your clergy, that is, you tell yourself, oh, well, God's given me this power. That's Malenko, bringing out your bad side.
Exactly. He's making it seem attractive. He's making you rationalize it, and that's the illusion he casts.
And to summarize, Riddle Box is, when you die, it's like he pops up if you lived a life of bad things and you go to hell, right? That's Riddle Box?
That's right. You turn the crank and you just see what you get, and it determines your fate. You know what I mean? And Jeckel Brothers reminds me of that, because it's a thing that it can do, but it's a bit more of both, you know what I mean? Because it's a thing that can be a metaphor as you live, you know what I mean? Like, are you adding balls to their act? But it's also a metaphor as far as judgment when you die. And I think it's kind of diverse like that.
And it's all goes with magic, and ICP being an interesting example of vaudevillian entertainment with the clowns, the circus, the sideshows, and also like another one of my favorite artists, Weird Al, the accordion, that came from vaudeville. A lot of things in like underground 80s and 90s culture, wrestling too, that we love, are directly descendant from vaudevillian culture. And then in vaudevillian culture, you'd have like, meet the Eastern magician from far off lands. He will blah, blah, blah. And people are like, oh, I've never been there. Oh, so anyway,
tarot cards and all that stuff.
This like the dark stuff. And ICP does this amazing thing on Echo Side where they flip it and be like, this is what we're about, and we're about to hit you with it. And we'll get into that. So there's a lot to talk about. So this came out on May 25th, 1999. I had a memory where I started sophomore year in high school. Marilyn Manson's Mechanical Animals came out, and I listened to that the first weekend at home. Like, I set up a tent in my room. Even though I was 16, I set up a tent. Then at the end of the year, I was studying for my chemistry final. It was the last final, and I was in the same tent. I set it up. And I was listening to Jeckel Brothers because I finished studying, and the next day I got like a really good grade. But I remember listening to it, and it psyched me up for my chemistry test. I mean, that's real nerdy, but I have a distinct memory of starting the year with Mechanical Animals, which was like Marilyn Manson's In Utero, because he already killed it with Antichrist Superstar, and then ICP ending the year with Jeckel Brothers. It was just the time, man. Marilyn Manson, ICP, like all that stuff was what I loved as a kid. And so I have a memory of listening to it for the first time. What's your memory of listening to this for the first time?
So I think it was the third Joker's card that I bought, because I bought Rize Shangri-La first, then Malenko, and then Jeckel Brothers. And I just remember being absolutely blown away. I remember the Echo Side song freaking me out. And I just remember thinking, dude, this is an amazing album front to back. And I still think that to this day.
So it's Island's third album on ICP's third album on Island Records, right? And the fifth in the Joker's card first deck. So the first two being Malenko and Forgotten Freshness on Island.
Yep,
and then this was their third. Where did it debut on Billboard? What number, Snax?
It actually debuted on number 4, which is crazy. Ooh. Yeah, that's wild to think that ICP, when CDs were selling like hotcakes, do you know what I mean? ICP actually managed to crack all those other artists, you know what I mean? Made it to the top 5 in 1999.
And there's a transition from the rock-oriented side with Malenko. It sounds like Cypress Hill with, your friend from an old punk band hanging out playing riffs, because essentially what it was with Steve Jones. But this was a rap rock nu metal record, man. Like if you look at the pantheon of that genre, which back then like critics hated, but now I think people look on it with this nostalgia of the pre-COVID world where like you could wear Jenkos and it was like horrible, but it was cool. Now people wear that stuff in like, Oliver Tree. Have you seen him like wearing like that stuff to be like the horrible ugliness of the 90s was actually fresh. And like Shaggy says, I could wear a Fila jacket and look fresh. Like all about owning what makes you ugly and horrible, but doubling down on it aesthetically. And so in a way, the aesthetics of thrash rap rock that this album reflects with the more guitars and everything is in a way kind of more timeless than like some of the other stuff. It's, you know what I mean? I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying?
I agree. Absolutely. I think that this one does stand the test of time because of that. And like, it's, the guitars, there are like, distorted guitars and stuff, but I think they're used a little bit more subtly, or I guess sparingly should be the word. And, they just blend so well with the hip hop sound. Mikey Clark is just doing some, crazy hip hop production in this. And, like you said, doubling down on, what society thinks of you as far as like what makes you ugly. They definitely did that with this album, and they're super angry. Might be one of the angriest albums of the first deck. Because they had released Malenko and they were a national act. They got their first dose of like actual nationwide reception, and they believed they were treated as a fluke, and they felt they were treated unfairly by the music industry. And you definitely hear that on this album because they're responding to criticism, and it's a wild ride.
Well, the multiple covers too, the two brothers, Jake and Jack. I mean, in a way, I feel like that was Shags and Jay. Right. Shags being, I don't know, maybe I guess they both archetypes like can interplay with both, but that helped to go platinum because people were like, oh, I got to buy both. And then they were like, oh, bizarre. Let's do two different records. That didn't go as well because it wasn't a Joker's card. But like you said, the guests on this record, ODB, Snoop Dogg, like the Jerky Boys. When I heard Snoop and the Jerky Boys were both on this record, my boy Chris, shout out Chris in Michigan, who got me into them, we connected through the prank call network. I've told this story in like the Seattle phone pranks, the great phone calls, which they sampled on Super Balls, was showing ICP love prank calls. And here are the freaking Jerky Boys doing calls for this record, and Snoop. Like, my expectations for the guests were maybe a little too high, and I'll talk about how I felt when I heard the parts, but bro, they were ready, and like they had the money and the promo, the videos were well produced. So getting excited. Let's talk about the trivia, because you did some cool if you have that Snax, you did some cool trivia research, and then we'll get into the lit hop elements. So let's talk about the trivia. Yeah,
for sure. So real quick, it's actually it transitions nicely because you just brought up the fact that there is two entities, Jake and Jack, Jeckel. But the thing is that it's not a double album. But a lot of Juggalos realized that at one point it was planned to be a double album, because on the Mr. Johnson's Head remix single that was released in Hallowicked 1997, it actually said taken from the upcoming double LP Amazing Jeckel Brothers, which makes sense because when you think brothers, it's two, so it would make sense that they had a double LP plan. But we also know that song was going to be on was going to be on Great Malenko, because that's what the Forgotten Freshness liner notes tells us. And I guess they, at some point between, late 97 and 98, they decided, hey, that's not going to be on Jeckel Brothers either. And somewhere down the line, they decided to make it a single album.
Yeah, dude, that's I didn't know that. Great trivia. A lot of the bizarre songs do feel like outtakes. I feel like Bizarre could have been one great Joker's card. So maybe they did a ton of songs, and as all great artists should do, and I don't think people do that as much these days, is pick your best. And They did. And I think that if it were a double record, it kind of maybe would be overwhelming. It wouldn't have sold as many. Unless they had a Hey Ya or something that was like on speaker box. But they weren't going for that, No,
and especially, at this time in their career, I definitely think a single album was the right choice for sure. And like you said, like Bizarre, like a lot of those ideas that didn't make it, we probably heard in some form or fashion later. Another cool fact: it is the first Joker's card with 17 tracks, which there's been a few of them now, and that's a big number. I thought that was worth noting.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And it's not their last with 17 tracks, is it? I don't think.
No,
Maybe.
no, it's not. Because
Yeah.
I know the Wraith had 17 tracks, and then I think Mighty Death Pop did as well, if you don't count the outtakes.
Okay.
And Fearless Fred Fury.
Yeah, good. So Jeckel Brothers, one of the things about it too is it's a long record. I mean, I listened to it again last night. It's 70 minutes. It's 69 minutes 30 seconds. That's long. It's very long. Nowadays, you do 10 songs, you're crazy. Like, yo, bro, why'd you put out an EP? You need engagement with your fans.
Yeah,
get out of here. You know what I'm saying? So, my man Snax, when our son was born. I had a lot of time. I was up like with him while he was trying to sleep, watching over him. I started reading this book he sent me called The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Now, you probably knew this, Snax, but this is based on this German legend in part called Faust, the legend of Faust. And so let's talk about the tragical history of the life and death of Dr. Faustus. So basically the theme is we can mess up, but we can also be redeemed. And that is in some of the stories. So Christopher Marlowe was a British author who in the late 16th Elizabethan era took this story, this German story that had this big word of mouth popularity. Basically, this story of this man who realizes if he sells his soul to the devil, will be given powers in life. This is the story of Faust. So Dr. Faustus, he's a doctor who basically, he says, the world doesn't have any meaning unless I have power over it. And so the play, though, much like ICP, they were given this underground, like almost legendary status when they got dropped from Disney and all. They were so notorious. They still are, but there was all this mystery around them. When Dr. Faustus, the play, started premiering and showing, there are these rumors around that it was so well done that there were actual demons that came on stage because it was like an evil play. And so it had this word of mouth underground story. And the reason I mention that is because it's such a chilling, real story. The idea of what can you give during your life to have a perfect life, even if you go to hell. Maybe hell doesn't exist, so you're happy to do that. It's the story of Adam and Eve in a way, like knowledge. Like, what can you do? Like, what is your soul worth? But this is what's crazy about Dr. Faustus. In the play, there is a clown who narrates the story. He's a jester. What? And he at the beginning, he talks about what makes a good play. He says, if you have comedy and action to tell these stories. I'm like, we got Anubis and the Jeckel Brothers. We have these clowns narrating this story, which is Dr. Faustus, because this is the story of Jake and Jeckel couldn't juggle his soul. So we're going to talk about that, about how you have to compromise and find action and tragedy to make the whole universe feel like it exists on stage. That was the whole thing about making Dr. Faustus work. And what's crazy, too, is in the second act of Dr. Faustus, Goethe is a German writer who did his version of it. Basically, they travel through time to make this point. And I was like, the song, I Want My SH Blah Blah, he goes back in time to help prove this point. And so Faust believes that logic can only be, the only reason you have logic is to argue and to win things from people. Law is only okay if you can be powerful and have money, and medicine is only powerful if you can bring people back from the dead. Basically, his magic powers don't mean anything unless he has dark magic. So let's fast forward really quickly to Goethe, who did a reinterpretation of the story called Faust, and this came out in 1831. Basically, he was an example of Weimar classicism, and the main thing he changed from Christopher Marlowe is he opens with this scene where God and Mephistopheles are talking about, can we corrupt this guy's soul? And I was thinking of the Screw Tape Letters and thinking about how that is like a reaction to that story. So it's really crazy, man, how these themes they've been written by, Goethe and Christopher Marlowe, some of the greatest writers of all time, have dealt with this theme. And so Jake and Jeckel are juggling the souls. It's God and Mephistopheles in a way,
That's incredibly wig flipping as always, Lars, dude. I'm starting to think that ICP are actually secretly, literature and mythology PhDs. Dude,
yeah, right.
Mythology. How does this stuff make it in there,
I mean, well, because it's
universal,
a lot of imagery. Maybe. It's universal, and a lot of imagery that also struck me in Dr. Faustus, Christopher Marlowe's version, are about how you light the stage, how you make it look like hell, how you make it look surreal. to the point where people actually think demons are on stage. Jake and Jack Jeckel are candles. And so it's what happens when you deal with the corruption of light, because it's theater and it's storytelling, and it's what happens when magic comes alive. And so what happens when these two characters try to figure out how to have domination. I thought about Malenko, and I thought about, like all this stuff. And it's because, yes, ICP maybe are very familiar with these stories. I wouldn't be surprised if they were. They're smart dudes. But also, it's like George Lucas talks about, it's the archetypes. It's the eternal stuff that drives great stories together. And this album, really hits that. So let's get into track by track intro. Like, let's talk about how intro sets up this story.
They kick it off really well with this intro because, it starts off with a guy character played by, one of our favorites, Legs Diamond. He stumbles into a store and he's looking for a gift. But he's greeted by a shopkeeper who do you think that's played by Alex Abyss? It sounds like him. It sounds like Alex Abyss is like salesman character, right?
Yeah. Now that you mention, that's probably him.
I think it is. And he's Legs Diamond's character is looking for a gift. He's kind of like nonchalant and stuff. And the shopkeep is like, well, I got something for you, and it's a candle. And listening to it, maybe Juggalos will think I'm crazy for just realizing this now, but I think he might have died on the way looking to get this gift and just stumbles upon this place in the afterlife. Did you ever think that could be it? Because why else would he be confronting the amazing Jeckel Brothers? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. I never thought about that. I think it works. I mean, I think they could have when all their allegorical songs usually start with an accident or something. They could have done that. So maybe it's up to your interpretation. Juggalos, leave a comment. Tell us what you think. Yeah. And he gives him the candle. He says, I'm looking for a gift for my dad. And he's like, I don't know if I want it. But I wanted to ask you something, Snax. Does it feel like Legs' performance is kind of... He's a great singer, but it sounds like he's reading. I got to get something for my dad before he goes and rats on me and stuff. It feels like he's reading. I love you, Legs. Do you feel me? He doesn't sell it. He doesn't.
No, I know. And I'm wondering if that's he's supposed, because I kind of take it too, as the character is supposed to be a bit rude or something. But I totally know what you mean. It's not as convincing as his performance in Hallelujah or stuff like that.
But we go back to the story of light and sin and how these things play in mythology, the danger of the occult. Here, take the candle. He's a Mephistophelian character. Take it. He's like, I don't know, man. He's like, what is it? It ends with this is the amazing Jeckel Brothers. He won't let him leave without it, right?
Exactly. Very insistent, wants him to take it. And that's when we, hear the first self-titled track. A lot of Joker's cards have them. Pretty sure most, besides maybe Ringmaster. And it's of course, there's two brothers, so there's two tracks on this one. The first one is Jake Jeckel, and just sets up the sonic amazingness of this album.
And the breakbeat sample is from Lee Dorsey's what song? What's the track?
Get Out of My Life, Woman.
That's a great find. I didn't know that. It's so dope you found that. And it's this is it feels like a real Joker's card intro. And I love how Jay... I've taken this from Jay, how he'll start a rap by doing some weird onomatopoeia or some weird thing with his voice in the pickup to the bar, "Aye, boys and girls, it's night time on a Boogie Woogie Woo," or he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen," blah, blah, blah. It's so funny how Jay is such an unorthodox rapper. He's one of my top 3 favorite rappers of all time. 100%. My other two being KRS-One and E40. Had to shout them both out. But the way he kicked, it's all right, here we go. This is full. This is not Korn. This is not the new Dr. Dre. This is something very different. The way he starts doing that thing with his voice, I think is so tight.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So, and then after Jake Jeckel, there's a great transition where the beat just kind of changes and it sounds like keyboard sounds. And Jay or Shaggy, it's probably Jay yelling, Mike, turn me up, right? They're yelling at him.
Yes.
And he goes, welcome. It's like a long one song. It's like the same tempo almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's right. The dissonant pianos in between the two songs. Absolutely.
Okay, so bring it on. So let's talk about this jam.
bringing out, like you said, like someone who, you know, wasn't familiar with ICP putting this on for the first time, they'd know that they were in for something different. I think that if they didn't know that by the time Jake Jeckel finished, they would know it by the time Bring It On started. You know what I mean? It totally sells, you know, the carnival aesthetic. They got like the organs in there and everything, the bouncy, you know, drums, just an incredible song. And it also sets up the kind of angry response theme to this album. You know what I mean? They're doing pop culture references. They sound angry, and it's just such an incredible song. One of my favorite Joker's card openers.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's rock choruses, but it's not rap metal. Bring it. They're shouting and they're having fun, but it's not screaming. Okay, so you know when he talks about, he goes like, he goes, and sometimes it reminds me of $85 an hour when he introduces himself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That flow.
100%. And like, you know, they're referencing like David Koresh, you know, like broken neck with the flick of a wrist, all this player hating's getting me pissed. Like, you know, they were coming out swinging, dude. Like, this is one of the most energetic songs ICP has ever done. I'm pimping like David Koresh was.
That is one of Shaggy's all-time best lines. My friend DJ and I, who produced a lot of my early stuff, he was like the only Juggalo kid I knew at Stanford, and like we would always quote that line like we're in the studio. I'm pimping like David Koresh was. And then on tour, multiple times we've gone to see where the Branch Davidians had their standoff. I went once on a tour with MC Chris, and then on a second tour, and we went and took pictures, and we parked our van on the neighbor's like driveway to take pictures. Wow. And they were definitely yelling at us, and they were definitely thinking about how David Koresh was not there anymore. You know what I'm saying? There. So it's like that whole story is crazy. Like, I think the federal government went a little hard on him, but at the same time, that's a whole nother conversation. This is all news that was relatively recent. And Columbine, people say I got bombs in my locker. Like Shags, I love how during that part of the verse the beat changes a lot, and that's something that they would get lazy about later. Like, we'll be honest, like the beats don't change. They're not as musical as on this record. But that is like, tying in the whole thing about how they blame Marilyn Manson. Columbine had happened like that year. So it's I think the
month before, right? Or was it 99 or 97? It was 99, right?
It was 99. Actually, well, maybe they had written it before Columbine. I don't know.
They might have written it, but the fact that they didn't change it when the album came out like a month later, because I think it was April 99 that Columbine happened, and this came out in May 99.
Yeah, so they obviously back then. Okay, interesting. So Shags' lyrics are all legit. That's what's crazy. Up. Okay, so Jamie does all the characters, man. Paul is on the record just like a few chill lines on Echo Side, showing that Jamie Madrox is like kind of the one who's chilling with them and friends with them and really involved with them, and Monoxide's kind of in the back, which a lot of people speculate that a lot of the feud, it's Monoxide like talking crap while Madrox and Shags are still boys, like having like Christmas dinner together. I don't know. I mean, I do think I do think Monoxide has a great rap style, and I do like some of his raps, but I think the real talent in Twisted is Madrox. He's like one of the greatest rappers of all time and greatest vocalists, and they're both good, but I just wanted to put that out there. Like, you don't hear it. It's not Twisted on this record. It's Madrox on all the skits. Like, he kills it harder on Echo Side, I think, too, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Madrox is like switches it up. Similar to Violent J, like I find like Shaggy, you get like, you know, more consistent voice, but Violent J can go totally off the wall. Same with Jamie and Monoxide. But Monoxide, I think, started experimenting a bit more later on. But yeah, no, you're totally right. Like, Jamie is on like almost every skit. You know, the Shaggy Show commercials. They were using his voice so much in these albums, man.
Oh boy, because I'm sure he just. Yes. So here's my question for you: when he's asking for the chalupa, what accent is Jay doing? It's like so weird.
I know, it's almost like a Middle Eastern kind of accent. I don't really know what it's supposed to be.
Is it British?
Yeah, yeah, it's almost like it's got a hint of that too. But that's a great question. Yeah,
I guess it's so confusing. It's the culture. Like, why would this guy work at selling chalupo? It says chalupos, but the word is chalupa.
Yeah, a cholito, I think. A cholito. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Cholito. I'm looking at it on the menu.
The other thing about this skit is it doesn't really have a punchline or an ending. It's just that.
Yeah,
because most skits they have a point. It's like, okay, so This voice we've never heard wants this food from a guy who works at it's so odd. And that sometimes ICP will do something that they don't realize is like ridiculous. But if you think about the context, it makes it even more ridiculous. Like this next song, we talked about this before. Taurus, born in 1775. I'm like 300 and something, but I'm still alive. You're like, is it suddenly 2075? Like what is, but it's interesting how 25 years almost have gone past since he put this out, and I'm still confused by it.
I know. There's like a disregard, like, and I think they still do that. Like, I think they pronounce words wrong where they know they're pronouncing them wrong. You know what I mean? It's like you said, it goes back to that anti-intellectualism, and I think it's kind of fresh, but yeah, very confusing. And one of those things that people who weren't a juggalo would be like, what the hell?
These dum-dums, they can't speak English.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't mind not using facts or, in the way they're ahead of their time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. But, I think it's like it's just like a disregard for like, they're like, we're not educated. We don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like we're gonna wear this Fila jacket and look fresh. We don't care about we don't care about pronouncing things correctly. Which in a way that is hip hop, because it's just like ICP. I mean, this doesn't need to be said really, but what hip hop did was originally in New York is give a voice to people from the Bronx and disenfranchised parts of New York. ICP were given a voice to the trailer park kids of the Midwest that didn't, or kids from different socioeconomic backgrounds, but the white kids who spoke like this, who then it realized that it had a culture outside of that small group.
100%. And they're wild, man. And I think that they knew, like, there was people like them. Like, that's what ICP always say when they were coming up, like they were finding people like them. Later they'd be called juggalos. But I think that even though they didn't have all the juggalos yet, they knew that they were out there, and that's who they were, concerned about finding.
It's like the floobs, right? They rep for the floobs.
That's right.
And it brings us to an interesting point. Back in the day, there was this stratification of culture. This is kind of pre-Napster, the early years of Napster. People were still buying CDs, where the record companies owned the access to what was popular. They made a lot of mediocre music went platinum because it was the only thing that existed. Coming from the underground, it means you can define your own petri dish of culture and then sell it through the machine. And that's really the only way to do it. I mean, if you want longevity, which they've proven. And so this album is very interesting because it's like the moment this stuff purposely broke through, knowing it was going to be a hit by these machines. And then Island Def Jam having like a real hip hop affiliation, suddenly... it's just like, it's as a pop culture piece of history of the end of, it's a great soundtrack to the end of the millennium, because it's the changing of culture. So Absolutely. Speaking of time travel, thanks for sticking with me on my rant, Snax. I appreciate that.
Oh, dude, I love them.
I want my ass. I don't like the chorus. I think it's like rap metal in a bad way with the way it breaks down. I think it's cool though how it's like they're going through time, like we talked about Dr. Faustus. I like the raps a lot, but I always felt like the chorus was not musically that tight. What do you think about the hook? Because I've never loved that part of this song.
When we were talking about how this album holds up over time, I think it's the most dated stylistically. I totally agree with you there. I think it's catchy, and it probably, maybe they had live performances in mind and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I do agree with you there.
Yeah, but it's all good. The verses are tight as heck. And then there's something that they do with, I feel like, is a throwback to what is a Juggalo?
Yeah.
With a Mac 10. Man, they didn't even have that stuff back then. It's like, because that's like one of the funny, if you play What is a Juggalo for people who never heard ICP, that line makes them always laugh and say, what is this group? That's so funny. That's so crazy. Like, Connect 4. This, it's like they're trying to get that joke. It doesn't land as well.
Right.
It's funny, I guess, because Shaggy's checking Jay, but it doesn't land. It's not as funny. I don't know.
I know what you mean, yeah. And like just hearing the rappers do that, like I think it was the first people that I ever heard, like almost like they're like, what is that? Would you consider that like breaking the fourth wall?
That's exactly what it is. Great. Yeah. I was gonna say that. Yeah.
And like that's just so cool. Like I never heard rappers doing that, because they have like, and they just do the humor and like serious violence, so they weave out of it seamlessly, man. And this album just to do that constantly. There would be no ICP without the chemistry between Joe and Joey. And that's right. But sometimes they do funny things again that don't have the same magic. That's okay. They're still a great group. I just wanted to say felt like a throwback to that. All right. Track 5. Now, you won't bump this on the way to the Women's March.
this song could get a new band in trouble. But ODB from Wu-Tang Clan, you know, RIP, Old Dirty, like one of the greatest rappers of all time. Wu-Tang's Killer B, the 36 Chambers, put East Coast rap back on the map when Snoop Dogg and West Coast hip hop was huge. And it's interesting that they had the two defining MCs from these movements at the time. Snoop Dogg, who's part of the West Coast movement, which was the defining West Coast gangster rap, and Wu-Tang, the defining East Coast group that defined hip hop in the early to mid 90s. And by this point, these fools were, you know, maybe looking for checks because their hit songs weren't coming in as much. And so the story of ODB's verse on this is crazy. And you should tell it, Snax. The Jugglers, some of them might know it, but I wouldn't have known this because I feel like his intro, the way he's at the end, like his voice, it does sound like they're in the studio together, but that's not what they were doing, right, Snax?
No, exactly. And yeah, the fact that well, what happened with ODB's verse is insane. So, you know, they want to get rappers on this album, you know, similar to how they, you know, did back on, you know, Carnival of Carnage to break into the Detroit scene. I guess, you know, ICP and Island thought that rappers would give them more credibility in the hip hop scene on a national level if they got some national hip hop acts. ODB is a perfect fit, you know, on paper for ICP. So they get ODB, pay him a significant sum of money. I think it might be 30 grand. And it is literally ODB just rambling from like the intro to the song all the way to the end of his verse about women. You know what I mean? Just yelling the title of the song, which that was not the title of the song. ICP don't even remember what the original song was about that they sent him, but it had a totally different concept. But ODB was just rambling about this. It took, I think Violent J says it took him like 3 weeks of working on Pro Tools to rearrange ODB's verse to get rhymes out of it. And the last rhyme, I think, rhymes the same word. You know what I mean? I can't remember the verse. Maybe we could look it up. But it's like, it's not even an actual rhyme. It's just the same word.
He rhymes came with came, and he uses the different, you know, I mean, rappers could do that. That's called a pun is when you make a synonym a homonym, right? It's the words or whatever. I guess they don't mean the same thing. But it's when you make a homonym sound, you know, it's a different context.
So they're different meanings. Okay, yeah, that kind of counts as a rhyme, but that's still funny. It's like one syllable, and it's one of those for the last rhyme.
But what people love about ODB is how he's such a wild card.
Yeah,
and in a way, he outshines Jay and Shaggy's wildness, and that's why this song is musically interesting. I mean, I also think that they made it work better at the beginning when ODB's shouting. I feel like Shaggy's the one who shouts ODB, ICP. I don't think but he tries to do his best ODB impression. Do you know what I'm saying?
100%. I think that's Shaggy, and he almost sounds like old school, like first couple of albums Shaggy. You know what I mean? He sounds like younger in a way, and it might be because he's trying to channel that ODB flavor, like screaming to the top of his lungs.
ODB probably was always a big influence on especially Shaggy. You know?
I think he said that multiple times that, what is it, the Return to the 36 Chambers or whatever by ODB is like one of his favorite albums.
That's what's up. You know, it's not as bad as it could have been. It's funny.
No.
It's not progressive, and you shouldn't talk about women this way, but you know, it just shows the production style of Mikey Clark. And what's brilliant about it is how he takes at any moment, here's what I'll do. How he makes that the intro, and he makes it a coda as an outro. And you listen, you're like, ODB has some great, intuition when it comes to how to arrange his own vocals. But no, that's just something cool they did production-wise, which is dope. It's dope.
It's so dope, dude. It's amazing that they actually made it as good of a song as it is, like you said.
And also, there's a reference to a movie, and I didn't get this until I saw the movie. Maybe you know this, Snax. So there's a scene. Have you seen Menace to Society? Or do you know that movie? So the cop's questioning him about like something goes wrong with the robbery, and I think someone gets killed, and he's asking the guy, and the kid slips up, and he says the wrong time, and the cop goes, "You know you done that effed up, right?
Yes.
You know you done effed up, right?" He keeps saying it, and the kid knows. Oh no, he saw the whole of my story. So the way Jay says it, after I heard this song a million times and saw that movie, I was like, oh, they're referencing this classic movie, right?
Absolutely, and that line is referenced so much in hip hop. It's wild.
Okay. Yeah, and because it's like the kid did F up, right?
Yeah.
So that's what happens, bro. When you drop the balls, you're juggling. Okay,
100%.
Moving on. We're live with this episode.
We are, dude. We're stoked. We've been stoked for a while.
So Jerky Boys. So we got the first Jerky Boys skit. So the character's big old badass Bob, the cattle wrestler, who was introduced on Jerky Boys 3, which I think came out in 96, which, by the way, I was so excited for that record. I asked my mom to pick it up for me after work on the way home. Like my mom's, shout out to Kathy Nielsen, she's the bomb. She went into the store and I had it on hold. And this lady, this 40-year-old lady, 50-year-old lady, I don't know, came in to buy Jerky Boys 3. And they're like, this CD has an interesting audience. And my mom always tell me how they looked at her kind of funny when she picked up Jerky Boys 3. But why do I mention that? Badass Bob, the cattle wrestler, is the second gen Jerky Boys. So Jerky Boys 1 and 2 are the famous ones. Saul Rosenberg, Frank Rizzo. And then the third one, they started getting calls where people would call them. They put ads. So big old Badass Bob, the cattle wrestler, was the first new character. So it's funny that Johnny Brennan leads into this character because only the true Jerky Boys fans would know this. Like Jerky Boys 1 and 2 sold a lot and Jerky Boys 2 got the Grammy nomination. By Jerky Boys 3, it had kind of, I'm just saying the Jerky Boys records people know are the first two. These calls that are on Jeckel Brothers were later on Jerky Boys' fifth record called Stop Staring at Me. And it was their last record they put out for 21 years. But so these were on the Jerky Boys album that came out afterwards. But I don't think a lot of people noticed that. And if you're not an ICP fan, it's confusing. But the calls on the Jerky Boys album don't have the same sound effects and they're not produced as well and they don't have the music when he puts them on hold. So they don't land as well as they do here. But and Jerky Boys just put out a new record recently, their first one in 21 years, besides a few odds and ends compilations. So shout out to Johnny Brennan and Kamal, who were both in Big Money Hustlers. I want to say one last thing. Kamal was not on this record, but he was in Big Money Hustlers. So all these calls, the Jerky Boys cameos are from Johnny Brennan, who now is the only Jerky Boy. The Jerky Boys is just him doing the different voices. So when I heard that Jerky Boys and Snoop were on this record, I thought it was cool. I was hoping for like Frank Rizzo. We will get Saul Rosenberg.
Yes.
It's fine. It's good. Is it the best Jerky Boys calls? It's okay. But in a way, it's like offensive because he's like, it's like you could say it's like you can't call a woman now and talk about the stuff he talks about. You shouldn't have ever, but back then, I don't know.
Right.
That is not funny to me. That he's this woman's just trying to do her job. He's like badgering her about these sex toys.
Yeah, the second one of the two, we'll talk about it, but I like it much better than this one. I'm glad you cleared that up because I was actually going to ask you because the voice is a lot different than Saul's, and I've actually heard some Frank Rizzo calls. I was telling you, I was listening to a bunch of Frank Rizzo prank calls last night, and that's Johnny Brennan too. And this voice of this character is a lot different than that. So I was wondering if it was Kamal or not.
He's one of the characters they really tried to sell that never really caught on like the others. They were so excited. Everyone's like, new characters? Nah. Right. People were like, that's going to be terrible. Track 6, terrible. Now, this, I feel like, dude, taps into the early years of outrage culture, maybe cancel culture in a way about how people want to tear things down because they see them as morally wrong. Mm-hmm. Or just basically like, everyone's pissed off. But are you supposed to be as pissed off as you are on Twitter and like, talk about this and that? So this song in a way is prescient because there's so much rage. I don't want to use the term cancel culture because that is a loaded term and that is like some things need to be canceled. But in this context, it's about like, so Marilyn Manson's evil, but we can wave the Confederate flag. Like, can you explain that to me? Like that's a very 2021 dialogue, right?
100%. And like it pointing out hypocrisy and like these skewed like priorities that society can sometimes have. And ICP was totally a forerunner to some of these, social justice concepts. They've been, on the Confederate flag for a while. And this I think, again, when I use like it's music is so subjective, but I think if you were to try and quantify some of ICP's best songs, I think this is one of their best songs ever made.
I would say, because their politics land in a way that makes sense. Sometimes they're just talking about I don't know, it feels informed and it feels smart. Like the country we live in was built by slaves, beat down and murdered and stuffed in their graves, right? Shaggy has dropped some knowledge. I thought about that. Like, a lot of America's wealth, I mean, most of it comes from the fact that they had all this free labor from human beings they stole. And Shaggy puts that into terms, and you want to know why I kill people? It's like, they're riding for social justice. And I think that, like, in moments like this, it's like, oh, wow, they were kind of saying some real stuff that needed to be said that people weren't saying on a platinum record, unless they were, like, Public Enemy, but like that was a different audience, you know? They were riding with this kind of
100%.
politics.
And they're mixing it seamlessly with humor and cartoonish violence. And yeah, like this is definitely ICP. Oh, I think it's ICP at their most referential and their most like aware as far as pop culture goes. You know what I mean? They're very topical on this record, and this song is like probably the most prominent example of that.
Talking about why people made a bigger deal about Kurt Cobain than Eazy-E, because to Shaggy, Eazy-E is more of a hero. I thought it was interesting that the Michael Jackson line's reversed, because Jay is such a fan of Michael Jackson. I wonder if the label made him do that, if that was like they could be sued for slander. I don't know. Okay, I Stab People. This is one of their most iconic songs. This was all over Napster when that started to happen. Yes. Jay uses, like I talk about a lot, onomatopoeia when he's talking about stabbing people. And I use this technique. Some of you, anyone who's heard my Julius Caesar song, still stabbing, which is a reference to this, which Snax, maybe you caught that, but it's such a weird thing. It shows how crazy he is.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And like, man, if ICP weren't musicians at this point, I think they could have been voice actors, like, because they were just, they're incredible. This is like some of the craziest performances vocally. Do you know what I mean? It's so entertaining as far as their actual raps.
I mean, the dude is insane, so to speak. You're like, all right, bro. You're like, it's nothing ever on a major label ever. It's just so strange, but so tight. Yeah,
exactly. And, the concept is, ICP classically doing the crazy violence and making it funny somehow. It's literally about a dude. Jay's channeling a character that is literally, has some sort of homicidal tendencies where he's just stabbing random people. And he's like explaining these very various situations where he can't help but stab people. And on paper, that's a horribly violent song. And it shouldn't be funny, but Violent J and ICP can make that stuff funny and entertaining in a way that no other band can.
Well, it's a character, and it's
exactly.
And they referenced his panic attacks and everything. Here's the line: "I stab old people, ladies, little kids. I don't give a blank." I did a variation of this on my song "Alien Song" with the Blue Scholars and Homeboy Sandman and Coach Dills on Indie Rocket Science. I murder goats, kids, bro, whatever. It's like I channeled that line. I don't know. It's a shout out to that line.
Hell yes, that's awesome.
This song is so influential that did it get a sequel, Snax? The jugglers want to know.
Whoa! Still stabbing on bizarre question marks. It got a full blown sequel, which is as good. It's really an amazing follow up to this song.
I love how this is an example of like the sequels. Like they do something that works, they double down on it. They did a sequel. The sequel's great. It's one of the highlights from Bizarre Bazaar. Probably because it's such a short song. We asked Rudy who's better with a blade, Abdullah the Butcher or Misery. In this song, Misery stabbed Jay. Ooh, that's a funny shout out.
I know, that's another reference to Misery with the knives. That's so wild.
That's what's up. All right, so many people when Malenko came out, they were like, how crazy would it be if Bob Dylan had a co-write on the new ICP record? And guess what? The Dark Carnival provides. So Another Love Song has a co-write by Bob Dylan. What? Let's talk about why.
Crazy, dude. I just learned this while doing research for this episode, believe it or not. I've heard this song a million times. I've heard this album a million times. I did not know this until now.
Wow.
Did you know about this whole Beck sample situation?
Because I know Jackass. I'm a big fan of Odelay. And the song after, I'm going to do a hole in your neck. Saying they're looking stupid like Beck. They're shouting out that they sampled it. So a friend of mine, my friend Sean Donnelly, who's a director and an animator, he noticed that. And I looked into it. I always thought they replayed. It was just an homage to Jackass. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize they freaking went ahead and sampled it. So you talk about that, Snax.
So Violent J talks about this extensively in an AV Club interview. Maybe we can, link to it in the description, where he heard the song Jackass by Beck, and he loved it so much that he wanted to do his own like horror rap version of it. But then when they tried to clear it, they found out that Beck's song sampled Bob Dylan. But check this out.
A cover of Bob Dylan.
Exactly, because I went to listen to the Bob Dylan song, and I'm like, this doesn't sound like Beck's song, you know what I mean? But then another band called Them covered Bob Dylan's song, and that's where Beck's sample is from. Like it's a full-blown sample that Beck's song is based around. and quite different from Bob Dylan's song. But Violent J doesn't mention the band Them in that AV Club interview, so it's kind of confusing, but super cool to see where that came from.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Beck's Odelay, a lot of people cite it as one of the first postmodern records, because like the example Where It's At, he puts down the record and you hear the vinyl before. That it's a song that breaks the fourth wall about being a vinyl song on CD. That was like one of the first examples of a hit song that did that. That album merged so many genres and styles and samples. So it's interesting for ICP to then create an album that breaks that wall of, okay, let's take a Bob Dylan song, but let's make it a sequel to one of our songs to Love Song from Ringmaster, which no one knew. No one bought Ringmaster. I mean, eventually 500,000 people did. And then let's make this a huge budget video. But this is why Jay's crazy, but also brilliant. Instead of doing like Ghetto Boy style horror rap, which would have been like totally on point, let me sing this maniacal song about being cheated on and the rage it drives someone to. And let me make it almost feel like I'm improvising, like drunk in the studio. It's such a weird, and it's so weird that the label will be like, all right, we'll make this video, we'll clear this sample, we'll do this and that. But it has one of Jay's best lines. Maybe Jay's best line. I could go back to school instead and try to get my diploma. I'd much rather bang your head on the wall until you fall into a coma. That's not woke, Jay.
Beautifully written. You know what I mean? How poignant and beautiful. That's one of the ones that like Martin Bashir would read in an interview, like just with no like inflection or anything in an interview to like point out how someone's lyrics are violent.
I noticed later one of Jay's songs from one of Clay's mixtapes, he says F to Martin Bashir. Right, yeah. Yeah, because he felt like they twisted them, so to speak. That's dope, man. That's hip-hop. You know, the interview with Bashir. That's dope. That's hip-hop. From Pluto to Uranus. I'm underground fungus. Boom, bam. But Bashir's documentary on Michael Jackson is what got Michael Jackson in trouble. So, like, obviously, anyway, and Shaggy, you sound smart as hell, dude. Right?
It's so good, dude.
I also think songs about killing someone, killing a woman, it's not funny and it's not good to do. And ICP stand against like domestic violence, and Jay having seen his mom be abused by, different men. So, it's like, but they play the character, and maybe this is a character then who Jake or Jack would drop balls. They're showing a character not to be. I feel like that's part of it.
And I think this one, like this one doesn't have the humor throughout, like Still Stabbing, or sorry, I Stab People does. But at the end, it gets a bit over the top where he's like talking to the moon and like the moon is telling him things to do. So he's definitely playing a character a bit, but it's not as obvious throughout most of the song.
Let's talk about Everybody Rize. This is one of their best beats. Every time I've seen them live, they play it and it goes off. The Fago's flying. It's one of the best transitions on this record, how it goes into that. Yes. He references Beck. There's some lines I want to talk about, but let's get back. Snax, talk a little bit about the intro to this song.
For sure.
Let's talk about what notes you had on this song.
Yeah, I just, like you said, he opens up. I thought it was very funny learning what I learned, you know what I mean, about that song and listening to this album. I'm like, wait a minute. So he just got super influenced by Beck's song and it basically makes fun of him on the first line of the song after that. And I just thought that was so funny.
Well, and we talked about how Odelay broke the fourth wall with the vinyl. Jay breaks the fifth wall and like references the artist they referenced before. It's like so meta. It's ridiculous, right? So, yeah,
100%. And like you said, one of the beats is amazing. I feel like they must have had live shows in mind when writing this song, because lyrically, it's almost like a forerunner to "F the World," because it's just really calling out a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? And in a angry way, but also kind of a way that's poking fun.
Oh, yeah. I also want to say that Shaggy and Jay's back and forth on Jake Jeckel is some of their best, where Shaggy's rapping and Jay's singing. I think that sounds really cool.
100%.
And I think the back and forth on this is tight. It's different, but it's tight. And I think that, I want to talk about the beefs. So there's a corned beef, like that seemed, what is the origin of that?
Dude, I don't really know. Do you know what I mean? Because at one point, like, I remember on Shaggy Show, Violent J, like the original Shaggy shows, Violent J was talking about how he's doing his mic stand up because he's seen Jonathan Davis, do his mic stand. He had a crazy mic stand. And even in that, he was like kind of making fun of Jonathan Davis, but I don't know the origins of it.
It's just calling out someone bigger to maybe start, I don't know, just to see what would happen, right?
Yeah, probably.
The Gene Simmons beef. I mean, obviously Gene Simmons didn't steal ICP's aesthetic, but both were big in Detroit because a working class town. People want to go to a spectacle on the weekend. That's why Kiss was big. That's why Rush was always big in the Midwest, because it's over the top crazy music. I'm not feeling Gene Simmons. You know, if any of you heard his interview on Terry Gross, he's such a jerk to her, and like she talks about how boring he is and macho. He's just like an unintellectual blowhard. I think Kiss have some good songs. Maybe some juggalos are like offended by this, but I'm not feeling you, Gene Simmons. Like, I think we've said that before. Have we said that before?
I'm trying to think. I'm not totally sure, but I've never been a big Kiss fan. You know, but now Jay might have a point though with Psycho Circus, because I think Psycho Circus came out. I don't think I could be wrong, but I think that came out like in maybe 97 or 98. Maybe we can look that up.
Wow, Psycho Circus came out September of 98.
98, right? So you know what I mean?
After ICP blew up, maybe, yeah. Then
Right?
he did steal his stuff. So wow, Gene Simmons, okay, you got one on me. But it's there's these beefs where it's like the baby boomers versus Gen X. Shaggy and Jay are Gen X, Generation X. The baby boomers the generation before. Now you hear kids on the internet go, okay, boomer. I mean, Kiss is boomers. There's a bunch of boomers post World War II. You know, they made their money. You know,
Selling
it's
Kiss
like
coffins.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm not feeling a Kiss. But I would say my wife does like God gave us rock and roll. God gave rock and roll to us. She likes that song, and we've heard that. That's one of my top Spotify songs of the year. So,
oh, they got some bangers, dude. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, Rock Bottom, like, there's no doubt they got some dope jams.
They do. But I'm not feeling you, Gene Simmons, because you represent like a world that like could have died with the turn of the century, and it should have. I'm just saying, get out of here with your. But then. I don't know. Gosh, this is a long episode, but we'll keep it moving. One line, F skin color, everybody's blue. Then what would all these bigots do? Instead of your tone, they'd hate your size. That's why I must poke out all of their eyes. Tell me if you think this is true, Snax. I always felt like because Eiffel 65's Blue had come out the fall before the spring, everybody's blue. I'm blue. It's a whole story of a guy who lives in a blue world. I felt like that was a meta pop culture throwback to that hit song. But am I crazy? What do you guys think? What do you think?
I've never made that connection, but it's very possible because this is, you know, one of the most topical, you know, ICP albums.
Maybe but yeah, I'm blue, right? That was a hit, and that was around this time.
Still
Track
a hit.
10.
That song's a banger. I love like Euro pop, 90s Euro pop.
Iron Man 3, right? It's in the intro scene to that. Shout out to my man Sky Blue, because he did a sample of it. Sky Blue, we love you. You're a great rapper. Track 10, Play With Me. Now, I heard a rumor, people were talking about how they pitched this to be in The Bride of Chucky.
Oh, really?
But it didn't get picked.
I didn't hear about that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That would be a good fit.
Or maybe, this song or another song was pitched to Child's Play. I think it was this.
Word.
What's this song about?
Oh, man. So such a cool song. You know, it's from a toy's perspective, who grows resentful because at first, you know, he's played with, and then he gets kind of left behind, you know, and the kid doesn't get interested in him. Almost like a horror version of Toy Story in a way. It deals with those themes of the kid moving on. And, you know, I've always thought it's probably a metaphor for like fickle fans and stuff, or like how the music industry can chew you up and spit you out.
It's great. And like you're a toy they collect under their, Disney wanted to put, shout out to Disney, though, I love you, Disney, but Hollywood Records wanted to put them in a box and put them away. Like, nope, you're getting shelved, quite literally. It's a good analysis, man. And the intro with the wind up, it reminds me of the intro of Toy Bucks. It starts the beat, and then as a release, the beat starts. It's the same. It works. It's cool. It tells a story, and it's musically interesting.
Absolutely.
You know?
Great song.
Jack Side, the intro, your keeper of wickedry, being of your negativity and your hate. So this is the flip side to Jake.
One thing I noticed about this album is a theme that ICP does, where they'll have like a good side and then a bad side, and usually actually the good side is first. Like Heckles and Macabre, right? Like for the Ringmaster, the cassette version and the vinyl version, side A is Heckles, side B is Macabre. Jake and Jack Jeckel. Jake, the good one, is presented first. Jack is second. And the Wraith, Shangri-La. Good is first with Shangri-La.
Missing Link, Lost and Found.
Lost and Found. And that was actually one of the examples
reversed.
Exactly. The dark side is first. And I just thought that's a really cool parallel that you see, through ICP's work. And in traditional ICP fashion, a lot of times, the last couple of songs before the final song are some of the darkest. And, I just thought that was super cool, and I wanted to, point that out and see if other
That's
juggalos
dope.
noticed that.
Yeah, no, that's good, Snax. And the second record gets a little, well, it has funny moments, but it's dark too. I mean, if you look at ICP's makeup, Jay is the laughing clown and Shaggy is the frowning clown. And those are the masks of theater, right? And so that's the joy, the tragedy and comedy. That's why Shaggy's got the crying face. I mean, it's so like, it's interesting, like duality. If there's one central theme about ICP, it's duality, good and evil.
Exactly.
And now coming out with Yum Yum Bedlam, male and female, right? The different but gender is not a binary, but like the idea of playing with like different elements of the same context. Holler,
100%.
F the world. So they wanted. Okay, this is an example of them learning something they learned from Disney that they regretted. Changing lyrics, right? They were asked to change a bunch of lyrics, and then they ended up changing them back. So what happened when? So you can tell the story, Snax, the Beastie Boys story.
Yeah, for sure. So ICP mentions, or Violent J mentions in the Behind the Paint, that Island hooked them up with a publicist team. No one wanted to take on that job of being ICP's publicist. Definitely a hard job. But they got Nasty Little Man, a renowned, I guess, publicist team, spin team, whatever you call it. And they were also Beastie Boys publicist team. And of course, F the World has the lyric F the Beastie Boys and the Dalai Lama. The publicist team actually asks Violent J saying like, hey, we won't be able to work with you if you leave that lyric in. Beastie Boys are our biggest client and all that stuff. And Violent J is like, dude, we're not changing a lyric because of like a publicist team that we might start working with. You know what I mean? And Violent J is like, apparently the publicist guy said that one of the dudes from Beastie Boys was like, I don't even want to know who dissed us, just get him to change it. And he compared it to like a teacher who if you stole something like from from a teacher, the teacher says, just put it back. I don't even want to know who. So
you say one of the Beastie Boys asked them to change the line.
Yeah, and then little nasty man, I guess, relayed that lyric. Yeah, relayed that instruction.
Well, so the political, like the Beastie Boys and Free Tibet and those concerts were so huge in the 90s. And my friend's mom is a Buddhist, and she did not like that line when we listened to ICP in the car. She was like the cool mom that listened to ICP in the car, but she was annoyed by that line. But it's this thing they've talked about, how someone's starving on your corner. Why should I care about international politics in China and their repression of a country that has no connection to me? And that was that's the whole division between like the working class. People could say like the Democrats care about the world and globalism, where the Republican perspective is more about staying regional and staying small and independent business. I know I'm oversimplifying things, but that's the politics of being three Jewish kids who came from New York, whose parents were academics and artists, starting a rap group, than being from the poor side of Detroit and trying to do the same thing. You're going to see the world differently. And so that line, in a way, is very clever and a very, like, I don't know if clever is the right word, but it's a very telling line about ICP, how they see their place in the world. And if you watch the Woodstock video, it's crazy how everyone sings that line, like 100,000 people, because people knew that line, and it's a clever line. So, yeah, I wanted to mention that. It's, like, worth keeping in. Even though I think the Dalai Lama's tight and, like, China should not go to Tibet and subjugate people, but...
Right. 100%. And, like, ICP, they kind of expand on that on We Belong on the Wraith, because they're like, some of us ain't got time for the monks in Tibet because my own kids are hungry and they're looking at me for bleep. So, they definitely keep... they kept that theme going. But ICP mentioned about this song like it's all in good, fun, because, I mean, he even says F Jump Steady. You know what I mean? At the end, he says F Violent J, and then you hear the gunshots. So I don't think it's meant to be taken too seriously. I definitely think there's some legit points in there, but it's also ICP being ICP. I did want to say that Violent J in this song says, don't try and analyze these rhymes. In this song, I say F 93 times. A year later, Limp Bizkit put out Hot Dog. That is like a very similar theme song where it just has F, this, F that, or like a F'd up this and a F'd up this. And he says a similar line. He's like, if I say F 2 more times, that's 46 F's in this F'd up rhyme. And that came out a year and a half later. And I just wonder, like, did they get that influence from ICP?
Well, now we know why Shaggy dropkicked for endorsed. No, I'm playing. That's crazy. I mean, and also, yeah, they reference this. That's great analysis on both those points. Next, they reference the East and West Coast, F the West Coast and everybody on the East. And then he also says, F Ted Nugent. I had no idea who that was. So he's Cat Scratch Fever, I guess was his song from back in the day. And he's a very pro guns, right? Like I looked on his website, you can pay, I'm not trying to market his skills. You can pay for a $5,000 weekend with Ted Nugent. Well, you'll promise you a deer you can bring home. But he always used to say, you like to hunt a lot. So F it what? When I first heard that, I thought Jay said, you like to front a lot. So F and what? So when I met front a lot, I thought he had named himself as a shout out to this song on Jeckel Brothers. And when I met him, I was like, I asked him and he had no idea what I was talking about. So I tried to play him the song and the line is, you like to hunt a lot. So Damien was like, I have no idea why you played this for me. This is a horrible song.
But his parents did name him after Echo Side.
Damien? Oh, yeah. Damien Hess is named after ICP.
That came out, 15 years after he was born, maybe later.
We'll go a little quicker through the rest of these songs, but yes, that's funny. Okay. You know the guy who operates the Rouge Drawbridge on Delray and Jefferson? F him. So I want to tell you something, dude. You probably didn't know this, Snax. Maybe you did. On May 12th, 2013, do you know this story? Because I got to tell it to you. The guy who operates the Rouge River Drawbridge on Delray and Jefferson was working there. The bridge closed permanently on the lake freighter Herbert C. Jackson as a result of the bridge tender being intoxicated. This was the first incident of this type in the bridge's 91-year history. The bridge has been in a raised position since. Current plans... Okay, and it reopened on August 11th, 2016. But Jay gave a FU to this guy 14 years before he closed the bridge on a boat. So F him. You shouldn't be drunk while you're working the Rouge River Drawbridge on Delray and Jefferson.
That's wild. I wonder if it was the same employee as when this came out.
Yeah, that's crazy. Thank you, Wikipedia.
That's
Shaggy
funny.
Show. Jamie Madrox kills it on this, like with his skits. He likes his chili hot. It reminds me of the character at the end of Hallelujah. It's not Jamie Madrox where he says it'll be done in quicker tune. Do jiggles of a jackrabbit. I always quote that. So this commercials are funny. Basically, Shaggy's hosting a talk show. Gangster Fun was a band I knew about because my high school KSBB had gotten the CD. And I looked at it and I was like, Mike Clark produced this? And then when they were on this record, I was like, that's so tight. So I knew about them. It's a funny song. I think it's interesting how on F the World and Another Love Song, there's hardly any Shaggy, if at all. He's only a little bit of F the World. But so now he has his own song. So it's kind of like balancing it out. But I was so stoked for the Snoop Dogg feature. I'm a Snoop fan. I've opened for him twice in Rhode Island and South by Southwest. I felt like his cameo was going to be great. Snoop though is hit or miss with his cameos. Doggy Style is amazing. His work on The Chronic is amazing. The work on Chronic 2001 is amazing. And Drop It Like It's Hot are amazing. And they reference his album with No Limit Records, The Game Is To Be Sold, Not To Be Told. I didn't even realize that was a Snoop record. Can you name a single from that album?
No, I definitely can't. Because I think he put out a few albums on No Limit, and I don't know any songs on that. I think The Last Meal. I know Hennessy and Boot Off, The Last Meal. That might have been on No Limit.
So you know more about the era than I do. I think
probably
I
not
haven't
much though.
Yeah, well, the two songs are called. I looked at. They're called "Still a G Thing," which is a reference to Nothing But a G Thing, and "Wolf." What? But Snoop has sold over 35 million records, and it's interesting how ICP would beef with Eminem right after this, but it hadn't popped off yet, so Snoop could still do the record. I had a friend who loaned me Snoop's first album on tape, and my mom wouldn't let me listen to it. I put it in the car when she picked me up. She's like, "You can't listen to that." So then my friend shout to Ben DeGracia. He stayed over, copied the tape, I bumped it forever. What?
Dope.
Okay, so, but... Yeah, I mean, Snoop, it's tight when Snoop is like, yo, Violent J, I'm with the clowns, bow down. Yeah. It's tight. It's like, oh, I want to hear him rapping about Malenko and Jake and Jack and Anubis and Fago. I want to hear him when I heard he's on this record, I was be like, oh, he's going to do carnival raps. Faust, Goethe. He's not. Yeah. He's just, verse 1 is high ICP and verse 2 is people steal my flow and I get high. And I'm like, it's such a disappointing cameo. I don't know.
I hear you, dude. How Shaggy comes in halfway through and says, tell us, people try to steal your flow and all that. I wonder if they put that in because the second half of his verse was talking about that, and they just thought it would be a good way to make it seem more like a back and forth response. Like if maybe they got that verse like in 16 bars and they divvied it up into 8. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think the thing a typical group would have been is made the Snoop song feature be the single. If he can't be in the video, do an animation. Like if they'd done Jeckel Brothers, ICP, and Snoop, and it was slamming and dope and clever, that would have been huge. But nope, he's the guest on Shaggy's talk show. And so it's like, anyway, let's keep moving. Let's go on to Mad Professor. So this is a song about Dr. Frankenstein character who builds Shaggy. Do you call for a wrecker? I guess that's Jamie. Yeah. And he's doing a character which is maybe a kind of problematic accent. But they reference this, you call for a wrecker, on other things, right? The character.
It's on the original Juggalo show, like the one that they did the box set of.
Thank you. That's where
Jamie does that exact same thing.
Assassins is a Ghetto Boys cover. So tell me your thoughts on this, Snax.
Might be my favorite ICP cover. They just knock it out of the park. Such a suitable cover too. Violent J credits the original Assassin song, which I believe came out in 1988, as having the first, horror themed, straight up like wicked SHIT lyrics. So it makes sense that they would cover that one. It's more of a cover of the remake though, because where it goes like wicked clowns, like that is found on the second iteration of Ghetto Boys with Scarface and Willie D. They actually do like get Ghetto Boys. You don't hear that on the original. And it's amazing because it definitely is spruced up and it got a lot of the stuff added in there. They got guitar and stuff, shotgun blasts, but the drums still kind of sound like a late 80s, early 90s, like the 808 thumping. I can't say enough about this cover. One of the best ICP songs ever.
I agree. And it's one of the best musically songs on this album.
Yeah.
They changed the lyrics a little bit, like when they did Posse on Werner, Posse on Broadway. This remix a lot. As I walked through River Rouge, I saw this man. He was holding up a gate. He dropped it down on the boat. No, but the Rouge River drawbridge, River Rouge, it's the second time within a few songs they're referencing, within 3 songs, referencing this river. I mean, the same river.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. Also, the Sporty Spice reference, people might not know who Sporty Spice is. Eminem also did a Spice Girls reference on his first single. Spice Girls, now it's like oldies, but the Spice Girls reference, I don't know, it's very, very late 90s, right?
Man, Say You'll Be There is still a banger, man. Again, I love the 90s pop. Spice World is a great movie. I just want to say. Dude, I got to see that again. I remember having the Spice Girls gum. I definitely see that as a kid, man. I remember having the Spice. I was probably like 7 or 8. Not that makes it any better. It's still like I don't know if any 7 or 8 year old boys were into Spice Girls, but I was, man. I remember I had like the Spice Girls gum. Remember with the stickers, putting that in my locker.
That's what's up. That's tight.
I might edit that out. I don't know. We'll see.
No, leave it in. B, I love you, but now you gotta die. That's in this song. I wonder if then they took it and put it into the song with ODB. Like this came first because it's a very specific line. It's twice. I'm like, what? I just heard that.
Exactly.
You feel me?
I've wondered the same thing. Which one comes first?
Then Saul Rosenberg calls Mike Wood. And the Hello skit, which is on Stop Staring at Me. That's very funny. And Saul Rosenberg, a classic Jerky Boys character. Johnny Brennan would later make this voice famous playing Mort Goldman on Family Guy.
Right.
But that's great. He's just talking about how he got hurt. And that's a typical thing. Saul Rosenberg calls and acts weak and sad. And it's actual Mike Wood who we've talked about. It's great. It's a very good skit. It's not offensive.
Who's helloing me? Like when the random person says hello, I don't know if that was on Mike Wood's line or Saul's line. And he says, who's helloing me? Like I still laugh every time I hear it, man. That's
a Jerky Boys thing to like pick out like when other people are on the line and make them feel confused. Or when he goes, I got a complaint, and he goes, go ahead. He's like, why are you calling me? I'm an agent. You're complaining to me?
Yeah, it's so funny, man. Mike Wood, he's definitely very confused, and it's just a great skit.
Well, and it's a step up from like the prank calls they would get left on Mutilation Mix, with Jump Steady being the Jerky Boys reference character who's a wannabe rapper. I mean, now they're actually calling their agent, calling the label, and making it's funny. And like they're good sports to be on the record. So it shows how it does 2 things. It shows how ICP's anti-establishment and they can make fun of their agents, but it also shows they're legit. That's
Agreed.
A winning. So it's a winning, if you could say, echo to their careers. Echo side, let's go.
Echo Side, dude. Oh, one of my other favorite songs on this whole album. I can't get enough of it. The first appearance of Dark Lotus. A little bit of trivia. This song was actually released before this album, promoted as a Dark Lotus single, only released 1,000 copies at, I believe, Rock of Ages was the only place you were able to get it, and was going to be on Tales of the Lotus Pod. But it actually ended up, Tales of the Lotus Pod took a long time. It ended up being on this album here. Such a cool song, very scary, about a dude named Damien goes to hell, tries to escape hell, ends up in a place called the Echo Side, which is a horrifying place that hell is within. And he eventually thinks he escapes because he reaches these gates, finds out it's the gates to hell again. So he's back at square one. Super crazy song. Amazing song.
And this is an example of like Jake getting them having too many balls to juggle with. What you can't even, you think you escape hell. The hell is that you think you can, you can't. Exactly. I think musically, this is my opinion. It's cool to have all the Dark Lotus guys on it. I think musically, it's one of the weaker parts of the record. And I think like, especially when the reverse part gets played twice, it feels like it goes on too long. But they're trying to get their, it's a more sparse. It's not technically impressive. It's just a story.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about what the backwards part is, because this sets us up for the Wraith.
For sure. So the backwards part actually says, I got it wrote here, like, F the devil, F that SHIT, we believe in life legit. Ain't you digging what we say, why you throw your soul away? Which is ironic because, backmasking has, in urban legends, it's always like demonic stuff that they're putting in there. But ICP did the opposite. They actually put like an anti-satanic message in the backmasking. So that would have been something that Juggalo could have showed their parents and maybe had a better chance of being able to listen to ICP.
and the chorus of Echo Side, it's like now there's this Japanese music that has like the Vocaloid sound. I don't know if you know about that. And a lot of music has that kind of, what's it called? Night beat? What's the subgenre of music? Nightcore.
Nightcore. Okay, word.
Nightcore is like basically sped up music, but a lot of like synthesized Vocaloid sounds. It reminds me of that. So the way it's kind of, that sounds very modern, that voice.
Word. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's such a haunting chorus. Like you said, very basic, the song structure, the hook, the production, but I think, is effective in its own way.
He talks about the wagons took his sorry soul and taunted him all the way. So basically there's no escape. So I want to talk real quick about wagons. So when we look at the myth of Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, the way he gets from Transylvania to London is these Romi taking him in their wagon through this magic portal from Transylvania to London. So it's this example of what is a cart you use to bring people from something evil and dark and metaphysical to urban environment. And so I was thinking about how like the Transylvania connection, the wagons have this mythical connection. And check it out, the next song, Nothing's Left, which is a great, amazing song, On the Day When the Wagons Come. And I know ICP have done Wagons, Dead Body Dragon, and a lot of reference to it, but I thought specifically about that connection to the Bram Stoker Dracula theory and the idea of like circus wagons or the Romani, but like when I'm talking about the literary archetypes. And I don't know any Romani personally, so I can't speak on it, but as a culture, I think it ties into that idea because there's a lot of superstition and magic attributed to it when we have a Western perspective on the Romani culture. You know what I'm saying?
100%. And, the wagons, it's almost like can be your personal reckoning, when the wagons come for you, the Dark Carnival wagons to take you to your eternal destiny. But also, like, as we'll hear in the end of this song, like, on the day that the wagons come, I just pray that you let me on. Like, that's like almost like the wagons as like some sort of rapture type event, end times. Like that's kind of what I get from it. You know what I mean? And it's one of those parallels, almost to like a Christian belief system. I know ICP aren't necessarily overtly Christian, but it kind of references this rapture like event.
Yeah. And it's a great, take me, pass me by and, Take Me Home, right, from Riddlebox, right? It's like ending this...
Coming home.
I'm coming home, yeah. It's ending on a serious note. The chords on this, I think, are based on MC Search's Here It Comes, which they sampled for There It Goes on Psychopathic Riders. It's a variation on the same progression and the beat. So I know they like MC Search. When I heard MC Search, I was like, oh, it's the same chords and played in a similar way.
Dope. I'll listen to that after. That's interesting.
Yeah. peep that. You can hear it sampled on Psychopathic Rize, so you know they're a fan. I remember at once someone was on Twitter saying, "Hey, MC Search, did you hear ICP sampled you?" And he's like, "No, that's Psychopathic Rize. Search, you ain't no juggalo." Why does it start with animal barnyard sounds and frogs? And then they're like at a camping thing, and Shaggy says he loves you, and Jay says you're being too sentimental. Shut up. I don't understand this. The sound effects.
I don't know. Violent J especially seems to have an affinity for nature. And I think Shaggy does too. Just appreciating the magic in everyday life. Of course, we had the song "Miracle" so many years later. So I don't know if they were just trying to convey that, like they were maybe out, at a creek somewhere in like a wilderness where they were feeling all emotional because, like you said, Shaggy, says, "Man, I love you guys, man." It's why I can ruin the moment. But there's a lot of animal noises. I've always noticed that myself. It's very strange.
What's the moment he's ruining? They're just standing at a zoo. Why can't you tell your boys you love them when you're in a yard full of frogs? And it's weird. There's like frogs, elephants, hippopotamuses, zebras. There's like animals that don't hang out in the field, so it's just odd. It's just like one of those things. Are like Jay's like, "Mike, get me the animal sound effects CD." Now it's not like that band that we're gonna sample for Twisted, where we don't pay them royalties or Jump Steady's the road. We're gonna pay these animals royalties, but let's get it. And yeah.
Every animal, we need at least 15 different animals. Yeah, I totally know. It's very funny when you put it like that. Like, what moment are they experiencing? Yeah,
it's just weird. ICP's always there's something a little bizarre, so to speak, about them. Yeah. So we talked about Bram Stoker and the Romani and how the wagon is a way that you can transport the undead from the urban environment to the metaphysical, how you can transcend life. Faust ends with the titular character evading damnation and finding redemption in God's grace and love for other people, with Mephistopheles losing his hope and attaining Faust's soul. Now that's how Dr. Faustus ends. Jeckel Brothers ends similarly with this idea that there is, even if you messed up, you can find redemption now and learn how to act right. So it sets us up for the next record. So let's talk about the aftermath in 2 minutes next, because we're going pretty long.
This came out in 1999. They were, pretty much on top of the world as far as mainstream success. They were looked at, as a joke by some people, yes, but a couple months after, they played Woodstock. And, Juggalos, keep in mind, this is only 7 years after them putting out Carnival of Carnage. That is not a very long time. It's 2021 now, so that's 2014 till now. So they were just, killing it. And they had a national fan base now with some support in Europe. And they only had one Joker's card to go. But, of course, we know that they were going to establish some of their other artists and supergroups before they take on the challenge of putting out the 6th.
And Alex would bring Jane to the office and be like, "All right, what's with the 6th? Oh, man, that's a whole nother story.
Exactly.
Island would help finance Big Money Hustlers. It would go over budget. ICP would help finish it. They had a good relationship with the label, but this album, it's interesting how they say F-Palooza, big festivals. I'll never sell out with you, blah, blah, blah. And then they're playing Woodstock. They said they had to. They got $1 million and,
2 months later, so literally 2 months later.
They play, and I was like, what? Didn't they just play Woodstock? But.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
No. So they'd have one more Joker's card to drop. They'd have other collab projects, which we're about to do episodes on. Holler. And Jeckel Brothers is just a great record. It's one of the greatest records of the 90s, I think, in my opinion.
It absolutely is.
My favorite record's Malenko, then this, then Riddlebox of my top 3. So we've done my 3 favorites. Dark Lotus, actually, I like more than this record. The first Dark Lotus. With Mars. Yeah, I actually like that almost as much as Malenko. But
it's a great album, dude. It's a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece. Thank you for hanging out with us so long. I'm MC Lars.
I'm MC Snax, y'all. Thank you for watching.
Whoop, whoop.
Whoop, whoop.